For many years now, in the space of leadership development, I've been intrigued by how much time and money is spent on leadership programs that teach the 6 steps, the 5 practices on how to do leadership. And how often it happens that leaders go back to the workplace 2-3 weeks later, they are back to their old habits, their unconscious stuckness, their patterns, and their egos start to play out again. It is this phenomena that led myself and Dr. Frederick Holscher over the last 10-15 years to explore a little bit more deeply as to how one can address leaders and leadership stuckness and how one could improve the effectiveness of leadership development programs. So we started exploring how leaders relate to the world, how they make sense of the world, how they make meaning, and what traps them, what holds them back, and what can we do as leadership developers to unleash the real inherent talent of leaders in a more significant way in the workplace. And this led us to explore leadership intelligence at a more meta level, at a deeper level, rather than just the practices and the behaviors of leaders. What is underneath that? And we started exploring the concept of meaning making, how leaders have the ability to adapt, to adopt, and to co-create their world, and how they are able to express themselves more fully. And we developed 3 particular intelligences, drawing on the work of people like Otto Scharmer and Simon Weston, Frederick Laloux. We have created 3 particular meta-intelligences of how leaders make sense of the world and what they apply. The first one is what we call the ego intelligence. And the ego develops at a very young age in one's life. From the day that you're separated from your parent, from your mother, the ego starts to develop. It's a sense of separation. As the ego develops in teenage years, it's even a deeper sense of separation, who I am, what makes me different, what makes me stand out. So leaders with a strong sense of ego and the ability to apply ego intelligence have got an orientation towards I am different, I stand out, and I have to make things happen with using my own ego strength. In other words, the capacity to predict the future and to control the outcome, to make things happen from the outside in, is the capacity to work with one's ego strength. So the traditional models of command and control would fall into this space, but it also has a very positive aspect. It's the ability to be able to know the answer and to mobilize your team in a particular direction. To say, if it's going to be, it's up to me, you can trust me, you can stay with me, I know where I need to take you. And they use influencing strategies like pull and push, inspiration, or even sometimes discipline, training to shape the organization and to move or inspire the organization in the direction that they feel that it should go. The upside of this obviously is speed, it's quick decision making, and when there's a crisis, this kind of ego strength and ego energy is needed. So ego intelligence is the ability to separate and to control things from the outside in, using your own ego strength to make things happen. These leaders would often even say things like, it's lonely at the top. If it's going to be, it's up to me. And can become quite a strong matriarchal or patriarchal figure in the organization that creates a sense of security. This leader knows where they're going and we can trust them and we can follow them. Another kind of deeper meta-orientation would be the eco-intelligence, where the leader would see the organization as an ecosystem, like in nature, a living ecosystem. Rather than having to control it from the outside in, they see themselves as an integral part of the ecosystem. And their job now becomes the one who holds the space for the ecosystem to self-manage and self-organize. So they would, for example, be able to release control. If you're a control freak, you'd find this particular capacity quite hard. But if you see an organization truly as a living ecosystem, you need to create enough psychological security and safety for autonomous teams to self-manage and self-organize. Almost as Frederick Laloux speaks about the teal organizations, or Brian Robertson about holacracy. It's the capacity for teams to self-manage and to self-organize, to be agile enough, to be able to hold the decision-making authority close enough to the customer, to be agile enough to make things happen in the moment, on the floor, in the customer interface. Now, obviously, that could end up in chaos, and it could be a disaster if there isn't a very clear resonating purpose that holds everybody together. So the idea of being purpose-driven and having a very clear a purpose as to what do we believe, what do we stand for, even if it's as simple as we're here to keep the city clean, or we're here to look after the psychological well-being of a community. The purpose needs to be crystal clear. If the what is clear, the how can be released into the ecosystem. The leader then becomes the facilitator, the coach, the human resources department becomes the enablers to create a new kind of culture that would be in line with a living ecosystem. So both of these are important. I hope that this is clear. One cannot, with all leaders, they have an ego and they have the capacity to operate in an eco way. And either one of them overdone can become a problem. So, for example, if you have too much ego leadership, you might be creating a sense of disengagement, lack of ownership, people just switching off psychologically, being bodies at work, just waiting for instructions, not having to think. The advantages, though, is if it's done well and in context and create very clear sense of focus, speed, direction, and uniformity. Eco, on the other hand, overdone can create chaos, people pulling in different directions, too much talking, too much debate, trying to get consensus with everybody, and that in itself can be a problem and create some chaos and a lack of movement in an organization and an inertia that could be developed. But used at the right time, with the right level of maturity in an organization, it can lead to wholeness, people feeling they can bring their whole self to work, that they can be flexible, that job descriptions can become flexible, and that people feel the ownership and the empowerment to work in a way that is more meaningful for them as an individual. So we started exploring a third capacity, which is more in line with spiritual intelligence or mindfulness. We call it intuitive intelligence. And that's the capacity to take a deep breath and step back and to tune into your intuitive knowing. Now that knowing could be anywhere in the body. It could be in the guts. It could be tuning in with the situation around you. It's a sense of knowing what is needed to be said or done in the moment. And that means that you need to be able to access a space of inner calm. Not frantically trying to figure out what's going on, whose side should I take, what decision should I make, but just being quiet and noticing what's happening in a room, in a board meeting, on the golf course with your colleagues, and being able to intuitively draw on what do I feel is needed to be said here. So it's almost working beyond the boundaries of a situation and intuitively sensing whether ego is needed right here, right now, or more an eco approach is needed. And what needs to be said, what needs to be done. So ego intelligence is working especially with boundaries and within boundaries. Eco is working with the interdependencies between boundaries. And the third one, intuitive intelligence, is working beyond boundaries. The ability to transcend. That's why some people like Donna Zoa would call it spiritual intelligence, because the ability to take a step back and transcend and see the bigger picture, see the wood for the trees, and tune in to your inner sense or your outer sense of what is needed intuitively to be said and done in this particular moment. So we believe that these three capacities, if leaders know where their strengths and weaknesses are, because you will be leaning towards different ones, if leaders can get a sense of where they're getting stuck. Are they getting stuck in ego? Are they too eco? Are they too spiritual in the way they work? A sense of self-awareness of where you are at and where you might be getting stuck. And then developing specific practices around developing these three capacities is what we believe will take leadership development to the next level.